So there's 4 factors that go into producing quick and healthy starts. And that's light, heat, soil, and moisture. So when it comes to light, it's, your best bet is someplace where you're going to get full sun, right? Because you're probably starting this late winter, early spring, when there's a lot less light out. The days are shorter, so sometimes just putting them up against a windowsill, you may not get enough sun, and the plants are going to be stretching out to try to get to the light, and that'll make them leggy. And that's what causes legginess, is either they're too close together and they're all trying to fight each other for light, or they're trying to stretch towards the source of light. So making anything you can out of just some plastic, it's very easy to find greenhouse plastic, and you want to use greenhouse plastic, not something from the local hardware store. Even the most rough structure is going to work better than the windowsill, so that you can get as much light as possible. Very important. Light is what's going to give those seedlings energy. So next thing is soil. So finding good potting soil is really important. It's there's basic components to pretty much all good potting soil, and that's compost, perlite, which is these little white things in here. Beyond the major components, it's going to need nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and it doesn't need every micronutrient. Hopefully your soil is going to provide that, but it needs the major ones to get by those first few weeks. And usually in a potting soil, that's going to be some quick-acting one, something like blood meal. Other organic fertilizers take a while to break down, and that's going to be some sort of either animal or vegetable material. Like soybean meal is high in nitrogen. Soybean meal is high in nitrogen, but it takes a while to break down and make that available to the plant. So it's got to be something a bit more fast-acting. Now, so if the potting soil isn't providing everything, then you're going to have to spray the seedlings with a fish emulsion or seaweed extract. I personally really like seaweed extracts. It's renewable and it doesn't smell so bad. Right, so I would recommend just buying the potting soil rather than mixing it together, because it's somewhat hard to mix large amounts of it. But if it's a really small garden and you want to mix it, then go right ahead. You can follow a bunch of different recipes. I'll put a recipe up that you can follow and use. But it's important that it's light, and it can't be overly moist. If it has too much water in it, that means probably all of the nitrogen is leached out of it. And it also makes it for a very bad a medium to get into a tray, right? You want it nice and dry, so that when it goes into a tray, it's not getting packed, right? You want to keep it light and fluffy so that the roots have oxygen and space to breathe. So the next factor is moisture, and that's related to the soil, because the soil needs to be able to hold on to enough moisture for the plant. And that's somewhat what the perlite's doing, is helping hold on to moisture, and the peat's helping hold on to moisture, but the looseness of it is also helping it to drain, because you don't want too much, right? Just like you don't want too much fertilizer. You just don't want too much moisture in there, and that's going to have the plant rot. And so that's important when you're filling the tray, is that we're not packing it too tight. right? No matter what tray you're using, right? You know, I'm just giving it a light tap so that I'm not packing it all down. You also use a lot less soil that way, right? And that's a perfectly filled tray. And you can see when I press it, you see it's still got a lot of air in there, right? See, I can pack it all the way halfway down, right? Use double the soil if I was doing that. But we don't want to do that. It's just going to be not a good environment. And it's also going to make it very hard for the seedlings to come out. When you go to plant, you want them to come out nice and easily when you either pull them out or push them out. So. Right, you can see now, even I try to dump it out and it's stuck in there. Now that's a wind strip tray, and its real purpose is just to allow air. So it has air through the bottom, it's open on the bottom, and then it has slits along the side, which help for the roots to prune, and also provides airflow, which can help with not overwatering the plants, because you're going to get, things are going to dry out faster and things are going to stay soggy all the time. And that's really what this tray is designed for. And you can also do that with soil blocking, which you're just pressing blocks of soil and you're not actually using a tray. You just, you know, they're sitting in an open tray. And that's the same idea, is that you're getting a lot of airflow and you're getting root pruning. And that's a perfectly good method to use in your garden. If you're doing a lot of seedlings, it gets to be a bit messy and time consuming. So this is just a fast way to be able to get that. And then there's also trays where just your normal tray. And you know, these you find at any home center, garden center. They're the, you know, floppy plastic trays. They have just a little hole in the bottom. Very simple, and they work just fine. They don't have the advantage of really any air. All right, so just give it a little tap. All right, and they fill the same way. All right, and then after you're done with that, you want to make sure you dibble them all. And you can just use your fingers. You can make a dibble board if you want to. But this works just fine. And this keeps this seed in the center of the cell. Gives a little place for it to sit under the surface so that it will stay moist and give you better germination. All right, so this is a dibble board. And you can just do the whole tray at once. And it'll just dibble them all. Now the last big factor is going to be temperature. And that's going to really affect germination. If it's too cold or just way too hot, then the seeds aren't going to germinate. And it's a graph, so the graph, you know, goes like this. So there's a range at which it germinates really, really well. And getting nice, even germination, then all your plants are going to grow at the same rate, which is nice. You're not going to waste seed. And if you're limited on space, you won't waste a lot of space. So if you have a heated propagation or greenhouse, then a good temperature is keeping it 68 to 72. And that's kind of the mid-range for most plants. Things like lettuce and spinach, they germinate at a bit lower temperature, so if things get too hot, you can always throw them in the basement or in the garage until they germinate, and then bring them out quickly so they get that light. If the house isn't heated high enough, then you can use a heat mat. And that's kind of what I have. My tables are heated with hot water, And so I just can lay them on the table and get enough heat to get them to germinate well. And that works really, really well. And once you put your seeds in, right, you want to cover. You can cover it back with the potting soil you have. That's going to work fine. You want that very thin, right? You just want the seeds covered. You can also use vermiculite. Vermiculite holds onto moisture nicely. It will help to ward off water logging problems, like damping off. But it's not completely necessary. You can also just use potting soil as well. Okay, once it's ready, you want to get it onto your heat source. Here it's heated underneath, or onto like a heat mat that you bought, or in your house that you've been heating up to 68, 72, and that should be sufficient. And give it its first watering. And keeping nice, even moisture on a tray is going to give it the best germination possible, right? Because what you want is you want nice, even germination across the tray. You want to keep the watering light so you don't wash away the seed. And I try to water until it gets through the tray. And then that should be good. Right, and then in a few days we should have some very nice seedlings begin to germinate on here. And then if you want to, to maintain nice growth, you want to maintain that temperature. You don't want to cool it down, because then it's going to stop growing as well. And you can't let them dry out. That's really bad for the plant. It's going to kill the roots. It's going to stop the growth. A nice even amount of moisture. You don't want it to be soaking wet and then dry out, and then be soaking wet and dry out. So just keep it nice and even. You don't want to overwater or underwater. And it's good to lift the tray. A nicely watered tray is going to have some weight to it. It's holding on to water. If the tray feels really, really light, right, that means it's been underwatered and it's drying out. And that's sort of what's happening to this tray, because it's on the edge of a table and it's not getting as much water. So, that's one way to check, is just, does it have some weight to it? All right, so we're going to look at some, let's do it adjusted straight into pots. And this is a great way if you're just doing something big. You need cucumbers or zucchini, tomatoes. And you don't need a lot of them, so you don't need to do it in a big tray. Then you can just use a pot, right? And this, again, you don't want to pack it down. You want to keep it nice and loose. And it's the same idea. You're just going to seed it, cover it, and water it again. And that works really nice. And then you don't even have to pot it on, and it works really, really nicely. And so I use something like this for, all my tomatoes and cucumbers, zucchini, things like that. All right, so after a few weeks, you've been taking care of your transplants, you've been watering evenly, you're getting nice even growth. And you can just tell when something looks healthy. And it's not pale, it's going to have color to it. It's not going to be covered in fuzz or wilting. And so how do you know when it's ready? And when it can pull out of the cell just by pulling it, and you can see it's full of roots, right, on all sides. And this is from the wind strip tray, so you can see they've all been air pruned on the sides and the bottom. So it's ready. This one's ready to transplant. It's good to go. And here you can see that it's just a little too small. The plant will probably rip as I take it out. And so that's not going to be ready. But if it's early in the season, you don't want to go just and take these guys and put them outside, because they've had perfect temperature, perfect watering. There hasn't been any wind on them. So they may look strong in here, but they haven't yet been acclimated to the harsh conditions that are outside. You know, they're not going to react well to getting blown around and to swings in temperature. So what you want to do is what's called hardening off. And that's, you know, you have a nice sunny day. It's not too windy. What you're going to do is bring your plants out for a few days. You can bring them back and forth, in and out, and that's going to harden them off, right? They're going to get acclimated to some temperature swings, to a light breeze, and they're going to be much stronger seedlings and have a much better survival rate than they normally would, right? You see there's a little wind today, right? You can just set them down right on the ground. Nothing's going to happen to them, as long as you don't have any little critters or little kids to come and ruin them or step on them. But now they're going to get some wind, get some, it's a little bit, it's probably around 40 degrees, which they're going to be fine. We're not going to leave them overnight. And that's going to produce, you know, the very best seedling for success. And you've put so much time into it, right? You bought the potting soil, you made up your trays, you dibbled everything, you put your seeds in, you kept them warm, you've watered them till now, maybe you've put some seaweed extract on them. So it's important to continue to take care of them, and that's what Hardening is going to do, so that when you put them into the ground, they're going to survive and produce for you. So a good tip to do, and this isn't something you have to do, but can help have stronger, healthier seedlings, especially if you see any that are not yellowing or just having off colors or don't look quite so right. And we're not talking about underwatering, we're just talking about not having enough nourishment. And a great thing to do is to spray seaweed extract. And I like it. It's a nice renewable resource. It's just grown in beds and then made into a powder. You can either buy a powder or you can have it already in a solution that you add water to. And you can just use a little sprayer, and you want to give a very light solution to it. And you don't have to give much. And that should be more than enough for them to begin absorbing it. And that gives you know, a lot of things. It gives a lot of potassium, magnesium, iron, and they'll store that. And it'll also give them a better start when they get planted. It will that benefit will go much longer term than just being here in the nursery.